So, up till now, we've been hard coding in the numbers that we've been doing our calculations with. Today, we're going to look at how we get input from the user. So I'm going to create a new folder and call it input demo. Open up Visual Studio Code here. And inside of here, I'm going to add a new file called inputdemo.py. Since we learned how to use comments, let's go ahead and comment this program up. And so I'm going to put in the name of the program, .py, and programmer Rob Garner. A date. And then we can use our comments also to just kind of lay out what we want to do with the program using pseudocode. So I'm going to say, get first number from user. We're going to just do an addition program. So get first number from user, get second number from user, add numbers together, display result. I think I also want to put spaces here just to make it a little easier to see the sentence. So this is pseudocode. It's not really code. These are just comments. If I were to run this program, it would do nothing. But this helps me lay out the program and in put step by step what I want to do. So how do I get this first number from the user? Well, I'm going to use something called an input statement. And so I'm going to go into the Python interactive interpreter by just typing Python here. And we have our 3 greater than signs, which means that we are at the Python prompt. And I'm going to demonstrate the input statement. So the input statement looks like this. It's input and then either double quotes or single quotes. You put in the text you want to use to prompt the user what you want. So please enter a number. Might look like that. And then what would happen is when you execute this, remember when we're in the interactive interpreter, as soon as we type a line of code, it executes it. I can put in, my number, and you'll notice that it returns what it got. It got 1, 2, 3. Well, and it surrounds us with quotes. So actually, when it brought in 1, 2, 3, it didn't bring in a number. It brought in a string. So that would work well if we wanted to get a name, for example. My name is inherently text, so by itself that works fine. But how do we deal with this with a number? Well, one of the problems with this is we've got the input, but it just displays it to the screen. If we want to use that input, we need to do something else. And what we need to do is we need to store it in a variable. So often the input statement looks like this. It says num is equal to input, please enter a number. And if I were to put 1, 2, 3 now, I notice it doesn't display it now. So what happened here is when we just put input, this is evaluated as an expression, and then within the interactive interpreter, it just displays what it got. Here, because we're putting it in a variable and we have it stored, now we can say num, and we'll see that num now has the input. So this is the format that we're going to want to use here. So we're going to say num, and I'm going to say num1 since we're getting 2 numbers. And so we have these 2 statements. that are going to get num1 and num2. Notice the variables, we can name them whatever we want. And typically in Python, we make our variable names lowercase. We might, if there's multiple versions of it, we might add numbers. We sometimes, if let's say that we want to get the person's name, we might do it like this, for example. We'd say, and this would bring it in as a string. If we just wanted the first name, we might write our variable name like this. And when we write our variables, if they're compound words, we often separate the words in Python with an underscore like that. So I've got these two numbers, and let's see if I can add them together. Well, we learned how to make our formula, so I'm going to say sum is equal to num1 plus num2. And then I'm going to say print the sum of your numbers is sum. So I'm going to first display, a prompt here to tell the user what this is, and then I'm going to display the number. So let's run this and see what happens. So I'm hitting Control F5, and then okay, put in Rob, and enter number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and look, the sum of 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6 is 123,456. Wait, that doesn't make sense. What's going on here? Well, remember, input brings back a string, so this is not being brought in as the number 123. It's actually brought in as its characters 1, 2, and 3. When we add two strings together, it actually just concatenates them together. That's not really math. So what we need to do is we need to convert these to actual numbers. And the way we can do that is, so we need to convert this to a number. And I think what I'm going to do is say this is really a string. So I'm going to say num underscore string here and num underscore string 2 here. And to convert it to a number, we're going to say num1 is equal to, and we're going to say float of num1 underscore string 1. And we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to say num2 is equal to the float. And the reason why we're saying float is float means we want to convert the string to a floating point number. Convert a string or number to a floating point number if possible. So if they actually put in a number in here, then this will actually turn it into a float. And then we can get the sum. So let's run this again. And that makes more sense. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6. Let's play around with this some more. I'm going to hit F5 and see what happens. Let's see if I put Rob here and I say 5. Notice if I try to put in something that's not a number, when we do this conversion to float, it'll give me an error saying, hey, I couldn't convert this. So one of the issues here is that if the user puts in a value that's a string that's not really a number or can't be converted to a number, we'll get an error and it'll stop the program. There's not much we can do about this at this point. We're going to learn how to deal with that later. But this is how we can get input from the user and convert it to a number. Now, this is a little messy. So often what we do is we actually take this input statement and we just put it in here like this. And we do it all in one go. So we're going to get input from the user, or we're going to display this prompt to the user. We're going to get input, then we're taking that result and passing it to the float function, and then the float function is going to convert it to a number. And same thing here. And so the nice thing about this is it looks a little better, and we didn't really need that intermediate result that's a string anyway. So if we're bringing in a string, we just use the input statement by itself. If we're bringing in a number, we bring it this way. You can also use integers. So if we just wanted to get integers from the user, we would do it this way. And this would bring in an integer. It works as well. And then, let's see, I could put 23 and 56. And it brings them in. If I run this again, I could bring in, let's see what happens if I put 23.23 and 56 point. If I put in if I ask for an integer and it turns out that the user put in a floating point number with a decimal point, this will cause the program to break. So, generally speaking, you're probably going to use float for a lot of mathematical input unless you specifically need an integer. So it will this will be typically what we would do. But int and float are the two ways of converting our input into numbers. If we need it as a string, it brings it this way. And, the way you would use this is, with that, maybe what we'll do is we'll say something like this, well, and then I'll put in first name. So we'll display the person's name and then say, get my grammar correct. And then the sum of your numbers is, and let's try that one. And because the comma adds a space, I got an extra space here I didn't want. So I'm just going to get rid of that space there. And I can't really do something about the space here. We'll talk about that later, but on how we can better format our print statements. But that's basically our program and how we can get numbers and how we can get strings. Thank you very much.